Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this presentation by the Master Gardeners of Placer County. This morning, we're going to have Kelly Warman presenting Japanese maples. I'm going to be your moderator today. And as you saw in the opening slides, this workshop is being recorded and it's going to be available to you along with any handouts on our YouTube site after it's been uploaded. The link to the video and the accompanying resources can be accessed from our website, which is pcmg.ucanr.org. And you'll see that at the end. We'll put that website up for you to see. If you have any questions during the presentation, go to your chat function there on your Zoom page, and we will address the questions at the end of the presentation. So Kelly, take it away. It's yours.
Thank you, Becky, and thanks everyone for joining us on such a beautiful Saturday morning. I hope everyone enjoyed the rain yesterday. I know we did. So Japanese maples. We have a fun topic today, and the presentation itself, and there'll be 3 handouts that will be available after the presentation. So you'll have those soon. So let me get started here. Got a technical problem here. Stop sharing. Oh, here we go. Okay, let me start with who are the Master Gardeners? I think some of you are familiar with us and some might not be, but we're a volunteer group associated with University of California, and we extend their research-based information on sustainable gardening and composting to home gardeners to help everyone make informed gardening decisions. Where can you find us? Besides these workshops, we are on online, social media, and other publications. We have a hotline where you can submit your gardening questions either by phone or email. We have a website, as was mentioned. We have some great information on social medias, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. There's a column in the monthly newspapers locally. We publish a quarterly Curious Gardener newsletter. And we also publish an annual gardening guide and calendar that's an excellent resource for new and experienced gardeners. And we do school and community gardening consulting. You can find us speakers by request. That is both for garden clubs and for civics groups. We can give gardening presentations. We have workshops such as the one you're participating in today. And then once the COVID restrictions are lifted, we'll be back at farmers markets, fairs, festivals. We'll have our garden fair and the Mother's Day tour again, hopefully soon. So Japanese maples, we're going to cover a lot of stuff. So fasten your seatbelt here. On Japanese maple, the history, varieties, how to plant, where to plant, watering, feeding, mulching, pruning, troubleshooting, and some references. So just a brief history. The Japanese maples are native to Japan and also Korea and China. That's where they originated. They've been cultivated in Japan at least since 1600, but perhaps even earlier. And they were brought to England in 1820. And today they're cultivated worldwide. The stunning beauty of Japanese maples has made them popular worldwide. They are just amazing plants, and it's, as you can see, just incredible. Here's additional pictures of how much they add to the landscape and the beauty of this garden. So just overall, just an overview of Japanese maple. They can thrive in a wide range of environments. So they are grown in rainforests in the Pacific Northwest and all the way to our warmer climates in California. They rarely grow to great heights, so they're not classified as a shade tree. They can live long, 100 years plus. I think the average is probably 100. They go from 50 to 150. So a long-lived tree if properly cared for. They're typically slow growing, 6 inches to 2 feet per year. And that depends on the variety and also the environment that the tree is growing on. Generally, they like morning sun and filtered afternoon sun or shade. But they can thrive in full sun, and we're going to cover more on this later. So there are over 1,000 varieties that exist. Of course, there's not going to be that many at your nursery, but they'll have a good selection. They have many varieties at all of the local nurseries. They can be sized anywhere from a dwarf or a bonsai, I guess, to dwarf to a 25-foot tree is about the biggest. They have a variety of forms. They're both upright and then weeping. And then the weeping ones can be either rounded or dome-shaped crowns, or they can be pendulous and weeping branches. And then, of course, the dwarf or the bonsais. They also have a variety of leaf shape and colors, even variegated leaves. And many of them change color in the fall to a different color than they were in the summer. So this is maybe too much information here, but I just wanted to demonstrate that there's, of the different varieties, you can see over here, then the names, the different, whoops, sorry about that. The names, then they'll have a summer leaf color, and sometimes their fall leaf color is different, as you can see on some of these that are listed here. This one goes from red to crimson, and then the different forms. And then the height and the spread or the width of the Japanese maple can be quite different. So you can see on this first one, it's maturity, it's 20 feet tall and 20 feet wide, so quite even. And then the next one, the coral bark, is 25 feet tall at maturity, but only 12 feet wide. So we'll talk more about this. This is something you need to take into account, both the height and the width, when you are choosing the tree that you want to plant. So just some pictures here. This is an example of a weeping form, a very beautiful tree. And another weeping Japanese maple. And a third Japanese maple, weeping. And then there are more upright forms. This one with a pale yellow golden color leaves. And then another upright one, different color leaves, as you can see, different shape, but this is considered upright. And a third. So just some examples for you. So what about the flowers on Japanese maples? Their flowers are, I'm going to mispronounce this, monoecious, I believe it is. They have both male and female flowers on the same plant. And you can see these little flowers right here are very small and they're inconspicuous. I can say from our Japanese maples, the bees absolutely love these. You can hear them humming when they bloom in the spring. And then by fall, they form these little fruits. They're called samaras, and they are little nutlets that have this little, like a wing-shaped apparatus that when it falls, it can spin down, and they can be carried some distance. Just a little bit of trivia. In Japan, fried maple leaves are a very popular snack in Osaka, the town of Osaka, and they've apparently been for over 1,000 years. The city of Minho has a particularly famous for these fried leaves. So the leaves are dipped and fried in tempura butter, which gives them a unique taste. And they store the leaves in barrels of salt for 1 year, which makes them very, very tasty. So if you're ever in Japan, try some fried maple leaves. So how do you propagate these? Can you graft? You can seedlings, cuttings. The seeds are those little seedlings that are seeds that we saw a couple slides ago. You can plant them and they will grow into trees. And the seeds may not be exact clones of the parent that the seed came from, because that seed could have been cross-pollinated from another tree, but they will grow into a Japanese maple tree. You can also propagate these trees from cuttings, branches, and the local nurseries will have trees for sale that usually are grafted onto a rootstock, and that's a good way to get a Japanese maple also. So that you'll see several names at nurseries, scientific names. Acer palmatum is, and that's named after the palm-shaped leaf. That's one of the names that you'll see at nurseries, as well as these others that you'll see that may be called Japanese maples. And you can see the different leaf types. There's 5 basic leaf types here. The one on the far right is the Dissectum group, and it's a very leafy, a delicate structure, I should say. And you can see, I'm not going to try and pronounce all of the names here, but you can see the different leaf types that are there. So it's another thing to consider what leaf type you like for the look of a Japanese maple when you choose it. And you can see even in this picture, there's not just different shapes, but that's an illustration of the different colors also. And then one more picture that shows just the variety. And this is a small section. I mean, you could show 10 slides that would be all the different varieties of the shape, both the shape of the leaf and the color of the leaf. And again, some of them even have a variegated type leaf with multiple colors, as you can see, like in the bottom right picture. And the middle bottom picture is a variegated color on the leaves. So site location for planting a Japanese maple, some things to consider. They don't have strong invasive roots, which might damage borders or walkways. The root competition is not vicious, so they are compatible with most other plants. Again, they do want morning sun, afternoon filtered light is best. So if possible, you want to plant one where it's not subject to hot afternoon sun, but they can survive in full sun. So the best time to plant a tree is either in the fall or early spring, and that gives it time to allow the tree to develop a more extensive root system before the summer. If you plant it in the summer, you're going to need to spend a lot of time babying it, make sure it's getting enough water and not sunburn. So best to plant in the fall or the spring. So when you choose the site for this too, again, you want to make sure to consider the variety's height and width at maturity, and make sure that you're giving that tree enough room that it can survive and not have to be severely pruned to fit in the area that you want to plant it. So what kind of soil do these plants like? Slightly acidic is ideal, but they will grow in slightly alkaline soil. Sandy loam with low to medium organic matter is ideal, but they adapt to less than perfect conditions also. Well-drained soil, they do want a well-drained soil. They don't do well in wet, swampy locations with where the roots are continually going to be wet. You can plant them besides the stream or next to a pond if the root zone has sufficient drainage. So when you're planting them, you want to dig a hole slightly larger than the root mass. The soil can be mixed with organic material such as composted conifer bark mulch, rhododendron or azalea planting mix, or rose compost. You don't want to ever use in the planting mix sawdust, wood chips, or uncomposted bark, since these will use up the available soil nitrogen, making it unavailable to the tree, and the tree will struggle. You want to plant the hole deep enough so that the root collar of the tree is level with the ground surface. One exception to this is that if you have tight, heavy soils like clay, where you're not going to have good drainage, then it's better if the hole is shallow so the root system is partially above ground. When filling the hole, then you mound the soil up to the root collar to help protect the roots. But this would allow the plant to have some drainage and not sit in a clay bowl where it will be too wet. So the root system is predominantly a fibrous root network, and that's going to stay mostly in the upper level of the soil. So with age, the roots will go deep and deep irrigation will help the roots go down deeper, which will help the tree. It's going to take several years before the root system is established enough to compete with the other vegetation for water and nutrients. So competition from grass can be especially intense. So it's best to keep the tree weed free for at least 2 or 3 years. And that would mean not having a lawn right next to the tree. At least keep the lawn back from the tree canopy, the width of the tree, so it doesn't have to compete for water and for nutrients. So water management is more important than the actual soil that you're going to plant the tree in. How much water does it need? Japanese maples are medium water need plants. They're on the Woelkel's system that you'll see on nursery tags. They're going to be rated as a medium water need. So they're not a desert plant. They're not a high water plant, but they do need uniform moisture. That's key. So watering frequently is going to how frequently you're going to need to water is going to depend on the soil, excuse me, the sun exposure, wind, and the size of the tree. So generally, Japanese maples are needing frequent watering, especially in the first few years. They need moist soil, not soggy soil. So you want to check on the soil a few days after watering. Overwatering can kill the plants, but they also do not like dry soil. So if you don't want to get them overwatered, but you don't want them to dry completely out either. They need moist soil. So in containers, overwatering can be worse than underwatering. Remember that waterlogged roots can't breathe. So water the roots deeply, and that will encourage them to go deeper, which will help the plants survive in the hot summers that we have. Mulch, mulch, mulch. So mulching has several purposes. It minimizes the water loss during dry spells, which is our summer, and helps the roots stay cooler. It can help maintain weed-free conditions and protect the root in prolonged freezing conditions. Probably not a problem here. You want 2 to 4 inches of mulch around the tree canopy, but not next to the trunk. So don't have the mulch, you keep it at least 6 inches back from the actual trunk of the tree itself. Ideal is coarse bark, average to 3/4 of an inch size. And other types of organic mulch are fine. And again, you'll have to add more mulch every year or two to supplement what has decomposed of the mulch. So feeding or fertilizing. You don't need, these trees don't need large amounts of fertilizer, and generally you can get away with little to none on fertilization. So that makes them in that aspect a very low maintenance tree. You may want to apply fertilizer to a young tree to encourage growth. You can use a balanced fertilizer, such as those that are for roses, or an organic fertilizer. And you may want to test the soil to see if you're unsure of what would be needed in your area. Feed lightly. Overfeeding can increase the water needs because of excessive growth. It can contribute to leaf burn. And it may mask some of the characteristics you're looking for, such as the variegated forms might not be variegated, or the odd leaf forms may produce normal leaves. So don't over-fertilize. The timing of the fertilization application is early spring, before the leaves emerge. So never apply in the early spring, never apply after early spring, as this can delay the hardening off of the shoots in the autumn and leave them prone to frost and cold damage. And the mature trees don't need fertilizer. Your mulch will be sufficient. So pruning, how do you prune a Japanese maple? Winter is a good time to prune because you can clearly see the tree structure. You want to avoid pruning late winter, early spring, when the sap is starting to run. The sap will leave unsightly marks where you made a pruning cut, and it also could, that cut, because the sap running, could lead to plant diseases in the tree. Light pruning can be done any time of the year. So you can prune these in the summertime, light pruning as needed. Many varieties don't need pruning. So compact and dwarf Japanese maple are typically not pruned at all. And they're really pruned for aesthetics. So if you're happy with the way your tree looks, you don't need to prune it. So where do you start? You start, if you're pruning, with the removal of dead twigs and branches. Then look for cross branches that are crossed. They might pose a problem if you prune them. But of course, as mentioned before, if you like this look, just leave it alone. Thin the interior branches to highlight the structure of the tree. Don't chop back branches to keep this tree small, because this will destroy the tree shape and structure. Cuts should be made just beyond a pair of buds on the twig, and that will produce 2 side shoots from there. And the weeping tree branches, the weeping shaped trees that touch the ground may be trimmed if this bothers you, but you don't have to do that either. Now, here are some rules that are just for all tree pruning, not just Japanese maples. You never want to remove more than 1/3 the height of the tree or the branches on the tree. When removing a larger cut limb should be made just above the branch collar to preserve the branch collar. So never cut beyond the branch collar into the trunk of the tree. Don't use the tree wound paint that you'll see sold at nurseries and other places. That we don't recommend that. You just cut make the cut and allow the wound to dry out. And this is the best way to reduce disease problems. So the tree wound paint is not recommended. And important to make sure you have sharp pruning tools. So you want to make a clean pruning cut. And these will heal much better than a jagged or torn wound on the tree if your tools are not sharp. This is one of the handouts that will be on the website. This is just a top picture of the 2-page that gives you a little bit more details on pruning Japanese maples. So growing Japanese maples in containers. The full-size species in there, but they can be grown in tubs or containers. And of course, some of the smaller varieties are perfect for a container or a pot. You want to occasionally directively shape and prune it once or twice a year when it's in a pot. And 2 requirements is that the planting mix must be open enough to allow good drainage and aeration. So you want to avoid water-sogged soil, waterlogged soil in the pot, and make sure you pay attention to the growing season. In our climate, actually, both overwatering and underwatering in pots can be a problem, because pots do tend to dry out more than in the ground. So you have to pay attention to make sure it didn't get too dry or that it's not overwatered either. Minimal fertilizer, moderate watering, and if you're at a higher elevation where it's real cold in the winter, you may need to wrap the pot. And one more thing to think about with any tree that you're going to put in a pot is that the fat-bellied or globular, a pot that has a narrow, small neck, you want to think twice about, because you're going to have to repot the tree, whether it's a Japanese maple or an olive tree. You're going to need to replant it every few years in refreshing the soil. And the only way you're going to be able to get a tree out of a pot that has a narrow neck is to break the pot. So a non-small necked pot will be the best. Okay, which one is right for you? This is such a hard question to ask. So Japanese maples, they'll do well in the USDA hardiness zones 5 to 8. We're in number 9, and they can be grown at higher zones like ours, of course, but they can suffer from leaf scorch, and they require ample summer irrigation and protection from this hot afternoon sun. The local nurseries have recommendations for varieties in our area, and they have, there's many nurseries around, but Green Acres and High Hand Nursery is just 2 as an example. There's others, of course, I'm not recommending any specific one, but they do have a good selection of Japanese maples, and other nurseries do also. And you can talk to their people about what you want. Think about what size and what color, how high, how wide, when you go to choose a Japanese maple. So again, they can range from 2 feet to 30 feet tall. So do you want a weeping, a rounded, a dwarf, mounding, upright, cascade? You know, what are you looking to achieve? Are you going to create a grove of Japanese maples? Do you want a spotlight with a solitary specimen? Are you trying to fill a large container and plant a Japanese maple? Or perhaps you want a taller plant as the main attraction. So there's no one answer on what Japanese maple is right for your situation. And then again, think about leaf shape. What kind of foliage do you want? Do you want the palm-shaped leaf, or do you want the lacy dissectum type leaves? You know, people love, and you could potentially put different shapes. I have a neighbor who has, I think, 100 of Japanese maple trees. Many of them are real small in his yard, and it's just amazingly beautiful. So leaf color, again, there's a wide range of colors: red, green, orange, purple, white, pink. So, and some of them will be one color in the spring and then change to another color in the fall. So what color do you want? And do you want a sequence of colors? So those are some considerations also. So here's a slide that has just some. This is not an extensive list of all the cultivars that you can find at local nurseries. And again, this presentation will be available to you, so you don't have to try and write all these down. But one thing to think about, again, is both the height and the width of these trees, how high and how wide they're going to be. You can see here's one that's going to be 10 feet tall and only about 5 feet wide. And here you have one that's going to be 5 foot tall, and it's going to be 8 to 12 feet wide. So think about the height and the width, and of course, all the other factors that we talked about. So let's troubleshoot some common problems that Japanese maples have. Probably the #1 problem is sunburnt leaves. And there will be a handout that's available on this topic specifically. They are sensitive to heat, strong sunlight, low humidity. And you'll find at nurseries, they'll have some varieties that are more sun tolerant than other varieties. But sun tolerant doesn't mean that you can ignore them and they won't have some of these scorching problems, especially in the first few years before the roots are well established. So what can cause these sunburn leaves? Too much sun, insufficient water, and it can be an immature root system. So if you have a mature tree that doesn't get enough water, that is enough to have it have scorched leaves. So they do require regular watering through the whole summer. So how do you solve this? Is you plant in the right location. You know, make sure you plant in the fall or early spring, not in the summer. And if your tree is already planted in the full afternoon sun, expect to have these crinkly leaves for several years until the tree has developed an adequate root system. And pay attention to watering practices. Again, they want moist soil, not dry soil, not soggy soil, but moist soil. So it can be a challenge to maintain that. And again, water deep enough to keep the soil moist and deep enough so the roots are encouraged to grow deeply. Don't overwater. Overwatering is actually a leading cause of Japanese maple death, probably followed by underwatering. Okay, we're getting close to the end. Here's some references. This book is available at many libraries, or you can buy it on Amazon. It's that I've circled here at the bottom here, this J.T. Vertrees, and he's one of the experts of Japanese maples, a leading world expert. I don't think he's still living, but there's several editions of this book. You'll find you can I checked it out last year from the library, and it has a wealth of knowledge on Japanese maples. And it was selected in '97. It was selected by the American Horticulture Society as one of the 75 great American garden books, and it's excellent. I'm not sure if our libraries are open now, but when they are, you can check this book out there. There's another good book that's Japanese Maples for Garden, and this includes all maples, not just Japanese maples. There will be handouts on our website. There's 3 of them. One is on pruning, one is on placement and care, and then preventing Japanese maples from sunburning. And with that, we'll take any questions. Becky?
Yeah, there's no questions in the chat room, so that sounds like you've answered everything. I want to thank you, Kelly, for your presentation
Everyone
today.
awake?
And I want to remind everybody, well, first let me digress. If you're into doing bonsais, the weeping Japanese maples, I've got one that I did over 20 years ago. They're beautiful and they're very, very easy to bonsai. Anyway, I digress. I want to remind everybody that you can find this presentation along with the handouts. It'll be on our pcmg.ucanr website, .org, sorry. And it's going to be under virtual gardening workshops. And then if you look under upcoming events, you'll see the links and information to future virtual workshops. And if any gardening questions come up on that page, you'll see a link. It'll say Ask a Master Gardener. Go ahead and submit a question there and somebody will get back to you. And just a reminder, February 13th, it's going to be actually Kelly's husband, David Warman, will be doing a presentation on Totally Tomatoes. So thank you everybody for attending today, and hope to see you on February 13th. Thank you.